Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Keys to Real Estate. I'm your host, Mary Schuster. Well, we have to talk fraud today because there's simply too much going on around out there, and it seems almost weekly we get a new kind of fraud. Our guest today hopes to help quell much of that fraudulent activity by helping stakeholders protect themselves by locking the title to their property. It's really kind of slick to use a concept like creating an intentional title cloud to form a circumstance where only the actual owner of record can access their title or unleash their equity. So, if you're ready to hear more about all the different types of fraud that are proliferating and some things that folks are doing to try to help fight it, then Ryan Marshall is someone you might want to know. So, whether it's seller impersonation fraud, vacant land fraud, trust or LLC fake entities, Zillow and Airbnb fraud, fake assignments of private money loans, fake notaries. We're taking all manner of mischief into consideration today, and we're talking about what can be done about it. Y'all, they even try to steal Graceland, but maybe not in the way you think. Had enough? Me too. Let's get to it with Ryan Marshall. The presenting sponsor of the Keys to Real Estate podcast is RamQuest. RamQuest fosters a customer-first culture built around an unwavering commitment to provide solutions that don't just meet, but exceed expectations. RamQuest's newest title and settlement production solution, Horizon, delivers unparalleled efficiency, robust features, and scalability to ensure you have tools to boost productivity and elevate performance like never before. Horizon streamlines your operation with secure 24/7 access, automatic updates, and all the power that only the cloud can offer. Plus, Horizon offers a direct connection to the industry's most extensive network of service providers and partners. Experience Horizon for yourself when you visit ramquest.com. And now, please enjoy the show. Ryan, we have so much to talk about today. Thank you for being with us.
Of course.
Well, I'm going to have to show my age a little bit. Whenever I think about this topic, I can't help but remember back to 20, 25 years ago. I don't want to say sitting in a room watching a presentation from the Catch Me If You Can guy, the Frank Abagnale Jr. guy. And he did a great job of explaining how fraud worked and how it was continuing to work. And he talked about he had to fly over the world, all over the world, and actually physically impersonate someone. And he needed a Gutenberg printing press and all these things. And he said, if you think it's harder today, you couldn't be more wrong. It's gotten so much easier. Is it really more, has it really proliferated more today, or are we just hearing about it more?
So it happens all the time. And actually, going back to Catch Me If You Can, I actually attended a seminar where he did a whole event for a weekend. Amazing person to actually listen to.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was really interesting. And I'm a pilot also, and he did a whole bunch of impersonations of pilots. So it was actually really, really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as it relates to deed fraud in general, I think really it's broken up into multiple areas, right? I mean, people, they kind of conflate it in seller impersonation. There's deed fraud. There's property title fraud. There's so many ways that people kind of commingle that term together. But I think that it goes more unreported than it goes reported because we do have some safeguards in place that do prevent the crime from happening. And I think the biggest challenge is once a closing agent or a real estate broker, somebody finds out that they've been had, what do? Right? I mean, we're starting to get some publications from the FBI to submit it, and there's a hotline that they call. I mean, I don't know how many people honestly do it or follow through with it. I think that's the biggest issue that we have. I think those stats are grossly underestimated compared to the attempts that are actually occurring today.
Yeah, I think it is important to delineate between the attempts that are going on, which are myriad. The right now, the primary way to catch it is private business is having to catch it, which is one of the reasons I want to have this conversation today, is because we need to understand what all the myriad of types of
Right.
attempts and successful types are. And government is always going to be a little bit behind, right? They're just a little slower. They're not in the market experiencing it as quickly as we are. So I appreciate you being willing to come on today and illuminate for people all of the different methods that are being tried and are being successful, because you're right. I think we tend to have it in our mind, oh, it's seller impersonation fraud, or it's just vacant
Right.
land fraud. And it's really mushrooming and it's
And
becoming very exotic, right?
oh, and it evolves, right? I mean, I have
Yeah.
somebody on our tech team that lives in Pakistan, part of an AI group, and his 2 years at college, they trained a machine to study handwriting. And with less than 40 words, right, or 40 written characters, they could now impersonate someone else's signature and writing and the whole bit. I mean, it's getting to be a scary space where even fraud detection tools themselves are getting outpaced by some of the technology that are enabling the fraud to occur.
Okay, well,
Right.
buckle up. Let's go. Let's start talking about what are some of the different types of fraud attempts you're seeing out there, and how do we combat them? Like, because the sky's the limit. They're
Yeah.
coming up with a new method every day. So let's go through some of those if we
Yeah.
could.
So I think I mean, right now, I think the most common thing is that you see, or real estate agents, I think, see, are, they'll find their client's property on Zillow, right? They'll call their client up and say, "Hey, why aren't you listing your home with me?" Right? I can't tell you, I probably intercept a dozen of those types of attempts that I get across my email, or a friend of a friend will tell me. And, it's alarming, because how hard is it to post someone else's property on Zillow? And then to see how far you can get down the line impersonating that seller, right? Engaging with a real estate broker. A common thing is, oh, I only do text, or I only communicate via email, or, I mean, those are some of the flags that people have to be mindful of. Where again, they're just scammers. People, during COVID, they got bored and they thought, hey, what are some new and innovative ways that I can, scam people by sitting behind my machine? And so I think that is the most common way that people get into the crime itself, right? Another thing that we're seeing, which is, people oftentimes think if your property is somehow in an LLC, that you're more protected, right? You're guarded, right? It's they don't know who the seller is. The truth of it is you could go to the Secretary of State, you could file some paperwork for $40 in my state, have the officers changed, and then there's no fraud detection tools that could happen for me to go literally to a title company, say that I'm an officer of that LLC, and then sell that property, right? And so it's those more sophisticated attempts that we're starting to see. Another one that just recently happened about 2 weeks ago, the only way that it was caught was because Ron, right, was enacted in 2020 in this particular state. Well, the online notary certificate had 2018 as the date. And the closing agent said, hey, wait a second. Hey, those dates don't make sense. They were about to fund, this was on a Thursday. They were funding on Friday,
Oh my gosh.
right? And so this happened by just somebody simply saying that they were the trustee of a trust that they had, and they provided a trustee certification with an online notary. And that's how that person almost got away with buying a vacation rental up in South Lake Tahoe. And
Okay, I
so
have two questions about that. One, you would think that because it was in a trust, it would be more protected. And two, so many people think that remote online notary is less secure and more ripe for fraud. And in that example, you're saying it was exactly the opposite.
which is, it's interesting. So the online notary, somebody who knows what they're doing can go on to the county recorder's website, pull a deed that was just recorded, find an unexpired notary stamp along with all of the credentials from that notary, simply copy and paste that onto another document, and how would anybody know?
Mm, mm.
Right? And so, yeah, and that's exactly what happened with this particular trustee certification. They found something online. Again, that notary had no knowledge of that transaction occurring, and that's how they.
Okay, so it wasn't that they outfake the notary with an impersonation. They impersonated the notary.
That's right. They took the
Okay.
credentials of the notary off of another document.
Well, that's part of the joys of living in an online and transparent world, right? Which facilitates a lot of, I think, what you're talking about. And you mentioned before the kind of the finding your home listed on Zillow fraud, and we're starting to see that with Airbnbs too.
So the most common place where you're going to find that is obviously somebody that has less control of their assets, right? Less control of their property. So Airbnb, vacation rental, VRBO, those are common sites that people will go to. They're going to look for properties that have very low LTVs or no mortgage at all. Obviously, raw land is another thing that people oftentimes are just not paying attention to, right? They have a tax bill changed, a tax bill mailing address changed. A lot of times this is done right during the time when the tax bill comes out, a mailing address gets changed. That fraudster now has 12 months to try to pull off their attempt, because now that mailing address is going to go to something that they control, right? And so, there's lots of different ways. They're getting creative. Another thing that was brought up, this was a few weeks ago, there was somebody that tried to make an attempt to file a mortgage on a property. Again, they just recorded a deed of trust on a piece of property with the attempt to eventually foreclose on it and recover the asset that way, right? And so again, there's lots of different ways that people are trying to get into the crime. Mm-hmm. It's not just simply changing a deed and then going to the county recorder and saying that now you own the property to get it refinanced. There's all sorts of ways that people are trying to do it.
Well, in that one, I love that you brought that one up, because that wasn't even deed fraud. That wasn't mortgage fraud in the way we tend to think about it. So we tend to think about somebody impersonating a borrower, maybe their older family member who does own the property, or just pretending to be something they're not. And that's the kind of mortgage fraud we think about, where they take like a cash out refi and are gone and they were never entitled. But this one was different in that what's alleged, it was a fake lender who, to your point, made a fake mortgage deed of trust and filed it. And it wasn't to get fake loan proceeds, cash out. It was to take the property in.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
On the fake mortgage. And that one got a lot of attention because, tell folks the punchline, what property was that?
I don't know. I'm not that old.
There might have been some peanut butter and nanner sandwiches.
Right. And actually, to that point, if you saw the CNN, so CNN followed up with that group, and they basically were bold enough to say, hey, we do this a couple hundred times a year. Sometimes we get caught, sometimes we don't. Doesn't matter. And they're from Nigeria. What are we going to do? Right. Yeah, and so, that one just happened to get a spotlight. But I've heard, obviously, an uptick on those types of schemes. And that one, this one actually was happening in Maricopa County in Arizona. This wasn't even Graceland. Okay. But yeah, super similar.
Yeah, and you're right. I did see that article too, where somebody said, well, they put an email address on this document that they filed. Let's reach out to them. And they sent him a bunch of press questions, and they answered.
Yeah, exactly.
The press answered. Right. I mean, talk about flagrant. What are you going to do about it?
Exactly.
Support for today's episode of Keys to Real Estate is provided by Rhino. Much like Monopoly, every move counts. And handling escrow accounts without the right tools is like getting to Boardwalk without a strategy. The stakes are high and the risks are real. So bank on absolute financial protection with the Rhino software bundle. Rhino integrates with escrow accounting software and online banking systems to provide the industry's gold standard in escrow and financial security software solutions. Rhino offers continuous end-to-end accounting auditing, daily reconciliation, transaction monitoring, anti-fraud algorithms, and built-in automated reporting. Schedule a test drive today. We're hearing about contract for deed fraud coming on the rise too, since money is a little more expensive than people are sometimes able to afford. That's an oldie but goodie, the old contract for deed scam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, I think there's a lot of them that as the market starts to slow down, we're going to see another push for all sorts of things, right? Another one is, have you guys covered the right to list? All the right to list elements. I know that got slapped really quick, but there's all sorts of those types of schemes that are starting to appear that, again, I mean, I think for us, where we really want to be in the space is it's more on the education side, and then obviously providing a tool of prevention, right? But
Sure.
really, it's educating people. And I think that
Yes.
the more mindful somebody can be, hey, your property, the county recorder, right, has a duty to provide public information for the benefit of vendors and creditors and everyone else, right? And there are some things that we need to shore up and clean up as an industry. And I think that's where we should be focused. We should be focused on who's at risk, who's not at risk, and then how do we address the issue that way. Um, and I think a lot of the fraud identity tools that are being published today or promoted today, I think they aid in that, but I think that they're quickly getting overcome by fraudsters outsmarting it, right?
Yeah.
Filing a deed of trust on a property. How are you going to stop that, right? And recovering the asset in a foreclosure in a non-judicial state. How would you ever come up with that, right? Or an assignment of mortgage. I saw that for a hard money lender.
Oh.
Somebody did an assignment of a hard money or a private money. Now it's
Uh-huh.
private money.
Uh-huh.
A private money mortgage, and it went 2, 3, 4 years. They go to try to recover the property, and they don't even own the mortgage, which is interesting, right? And so yeah, I mean, to that point, I just think that as an industry, we should be more mindful of how the crime is occurring, or stay ahead of the attempts that are being made.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. It does take vigilance and a constant mindset of evolution. And, so many people are just trying to get to work and take care of their business every day and do things right, that not everybody has a lot of time to stop and think, okay, if I were a criminal offshore but
Right.
kind of understood how things worked enough, what what would I do? And that what the example you just gave made me start wondering about, are fake assignments of standard mortgages a thing?
Right. Right.
Basically
Well,
anywhere.
I think and keep in mind, they know the industry well enough that they know that they can't target like a Rocket Mortgage or a UWM because of the use of MERS, right? It's all electronic, it's kind of behind the scenes, they deed it to somewhere, and all of those interests kind of get interchanged in something that's behind the scenes, right? Where they can target a lot of the vulnerabilities that we have in our system, like a private money mortgage. Who would have ever thought that you could go down and do an assignment to someone else, and who would catch you, right? And so yeah, it's people are getting creative.
Well, and there's so many more avenues. And, I mean, old school too. Obviously, somebody would have had to have either walked into the registered deeds 30 years ago or broken into a title company and got a hold of the title plant. And frankly, people just that weren't willing to work that hard,
Right.
honestly, or even understand the process enough to know to make that happen. But with everything so highly available, yeah, we really have to we have to start thinking like, we're the casino, and Oceans 11, 12, and 13 are all out there
Right.
trying to come in and make the haul.
Right. And another thing too that's kind of scary is, so before I kind of started on this venture of being in the cyber fraud, property fraud industry,
Mhm.
we did a bunch of roundtables, and some of those roundtables were obviously very tech focused, right? Trying to find a technical solution. And it was astonishing that we could literally go on to the dark web, and we could go on to some forum and some chats and see how smart and sophisticated that people are. And they actually are selling profiles, physical profiles, where they have financial information from a data leak from one of the lenders. They have properties where they know that they're in geographical areas. They have credit unions, as an example, with a little softer internal controls. They have valuation mechanisms. They know which property they can do a BPO on versus a property that may require full appraisal. I mean, it's complex in terms of those things, and you can buy them for $150 US dollars, as an example. It's scary. It's scary.
I had no idea that it had gone to that level of sophistication where they're basically putting together an owner's journey, and you can buy that for $150, and then it's all upside if you
If you pull it off.
if you pull it off at all.
Yeah.
I don't think most people know that, Ryan.
Well,
This is a
I
fun
can
unit to
agree.
have in your
I don't
job.
surf the dark web frequently, but again, when we're out doing research, yeah, it
Yeah.
was fascinating.
So did it take you very long to become convinced that this was a big and growing problem that needed real solutioning?
Um, so at first, I think I was skeptical like everybody. I've never heard of it. It's never happened to me, right? I mean, that was kind of, I mean, again, I think most of us kind of operate that way. And again, I've been a real estate broker since 1998. And so you kind of automatically, oh yeah, oh yeah, I've heard, yeah, nah, it would never happen to me. And I think as you kind of start to see all of the things, all of the ways that people could enter the ecosystem, and now with more and more publicity that's happening on it, it's becoming more and more of an issue. And now it could be, when somebody says, have you seen a red Ferrari? And now all of a sudden in the next 2 weeks, I'll see two of them drive by my house, right? As an example, it could be a sense of that where now I'm in the space. And so I have people telling me all the time about it. But it is truly happening, right? I mean, it is definitely a threat to the industry. I think it's more of a threat to the title insurance industry than it is to anything else. So far, with the exception of one of them, which there's still a legal dispute going on with the particular title company, the title companies have made good, and they actually have protected the person that the crime was committed against. There was an element of a duty to defend. They were made whole. They've always done the right thing. But at what point is enough enough, right? At what point do you have to safeguard yourself as a consumer? Because in reality, they're not the one that bought the title insurance policy to begin with, right? So it's really not their responsibility. But so far, they've been amazing players in this space, at least to the best of my knowledge, with the exception of one, which was a commercial transaction. The fraudster ended up selling a property. The new buyer got permits, got building, a demolition permit, bulldozed a building off of the property, started doing the site plan. The real owner shows up, says, "Hey, what are you doing?" Now the real owner doesn't want to sell, right? And wants the property to be restored, which again, I think that person is just out for the money. But again, that's the only one, to the best of my knowledge, that hasn't been fully resolved yet by the title company.
Well, I'm glad you bring up the value of title insurance and the people who stand behind it working to solve these things, because as I'm sure you're aware, we're having a separate conversation in other parts of the industry about how not beneficial, or not, at least not necessary, title insurance is in certain transactions. And you go, well, okay, which ones exactly?
Right.
And so
Right.
at a time where this is becoming more prevalent and is just another thing that the industry is stepping up to handle, we're saying, maybe that's old fashioned.
Right. Well, I think so. Again, this is my own personal opinion. We are not going to replace title insurance as it relates to purchase money, right? There's way too much risk with a buyer that's unknown to a seller and a seller that's unknown to a buyer, right? I mean, there is true value in an indemnity contract that occurs, and it's all obviously protection for a lender that's about to make a loan on a property that may or may not be done with fraud, right? So I don't think that will ever change, and nor should it, right? I mean, I'm a big promoter for title insurance, in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and people see now also if you watch any cable news during the day, you'll see some ads by some famous people who talk about the importance of monitoring your title. But do consumers even understand what that means? And does that help? Is that a silver bullet for the kinds of things you're talking about, or how should we think about those pieces of that puzzle?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think just like anything, we wouldn't be here today without, understanding what their business model was, right? Um, Really, everything that's on the market today, with the exception of something that we just launched, is all after the fact, right? Something occurs on title. It takes a couple days to become public. In their scenario, it takes a couple weeks, oftentimes, before their data company aggregates the data from the county recorder. And so you're 2, 3, 4 weeks, sometimes 6 weeks before you even know that a crime occurred on your property, right? Long after there's any prevention mechanism, or long after there's a point where you can actually fix it, right? Without doing a quiet title action. And so I think most of the county recorders now, I mean, I don't think I've talked to one county recorder yet that doesn't already have a free service. So, the service that you see on TV that costs you $200 a year, $300 a year, that the county recorder offers a free service, right? the exact same service that you're getting for $200 or $300 a year. And so, again, I think part of our mission too is to help educate counties, right? County recorders in such a way where they're also not blindsided by the crime. And so we actually provide a whole analysis for every parcel that's done in a county. And so we can now, I tell the county and the county recorder who's at low risk, who's at medium risk, and who's at high risk. These are the characteristics why, right? There's no black box. These are why they're high. These are why they're low. If they're at high risk, there's a preventative measure that you could acquire. And if you're at low risk, don't lose sleep over it, right? You're probably going to be in good shape. I mean, if you really want to do something, then get LifeLock or get some credit monitoring system. Do the free property monitoring. Super cool. But again, you have a reverse mortgage and you're at 105% loan to value. Nobody's stealing your home. Right. Not a chance in hell, right? And so oftentimes I'm faced with, I'm having conversations with people. Oftentimes they're in the baby boomer generation because they have a lot of equity in their property, or they don't, because reverse mortgages are popular again, right? And so probably 2 out of 3 people that I come in contact with, we end up, hey, we offer a free monitoring service, or I'm happy to get you set up for a free monitoring service with your county. There's nothing for you to worry about. And I think it's that awareness that we really need to isolate. The people that are at high risk should do something, and the people that are at low risk, don't worry about it.
That's the most lucid thing I've heard anybody say about any point in this transaction, because it is not a one size fits all. Now,
Right.
while we said that the fraud target window moves and they get more creative, but the basis of what they're looking for, which is high equity, low participation, that is
Correct.
the ultimate fraud combo, right?
Yeah, it's a financial crime. At the end of the day, it's a financial crime. It's, they're not looking just to jam you up or force you to go to court and fix your title, or, there's a lot of interfamily disputes with divorces. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on that kind of gets grouped into that. The truth of the matter is, it's a financial crime. People that want to go out and create havoc, they're not doing it for, it's not a not-for-profit, company.
Or
right?
just amusement. Yeah.
Right. Right. And so really, I think that's what we really stand to focus on, is the financial aspect of the crime and how we could prevent it. Our first whack at that was identifying the people that were at high risk.
Yeah. All right. If you had a magic wand and you could wave it over this entire situation and affect one outcome by magic, what would you do?
Well, I think it's what we're doing. I would put multi-factor authentication on every subsequent transaction. So we know the lawful owner before the crime has ever occurred. Just like when you go to a public library, when you log on to your Gmail account, what's the first thing that it prompts you for? Oh, you got a token. You got a token on your cell phone because it forces you to recognize that you're on a public Wi-Fi. It's the same thing, right? Do something preventative to prevent the crime from occurring. And I can't imagine any other way that you could prevent it.
Yes. Well, and for an industry that has trouble establishing repeat relationships with buyers and sellers because they don't interact with them very often, I think there's a real opportunity there as well.
Well, I think too, in our ecosystem, we're also looking for peers in our blockchain technology. So what would be really, really cool is, again, if title companies leveraged this as a multi-factor tool, right? Let's say for cash transactions with LLCs, trust, right? High risk candidates, then they also become peers. So every time somebody expresses an interest to unlock their title, where a subordination agreement or termination agreement is required for the next transaction, it goes to that title company. They're the ones that are now monitoring it. They're the saviors in kind of the entire process. And that, I think, would be a huge value or a huge lift for the title industry in general, right? It would create more value for the industry.
100%.
So,
yeah, because they're used to, at least with regard to what the consumer sees and interacts with, closing is the end of that part. That's here's keys, here's check, champagne, have fun. While there's still plenty of work, as you well know, that continues on after that point, there hasn't been much of an opportunity for engagement beyond perhaps here's your policy, or here's your tax forms at the end of the year. But to be able to position over into more of an ongoing guardian mode,
exactly.
and I know exactly what's going on, so that when this comes around again, I've been here with you all along. I mean, I think that's huge benefit obviously for consumers and for the industry too, and even for the lenders that are counting on all this to go on without fraud pleas and thank you.
Right. And I think too, consumers genuinely don't understand title insurance,
No.
right? Because we speak with people every day. Oh, I have title insurance. Well, you bought your home in 1985. You had title insurance when you bought it from the seller. Yeah, but it doesn't protect you today, right? And so, I mean, oftentimes there's those conversations. And if they purchased the property recently, we ask them, hey, do you have the extended policy? Do you have a home? I mean, do you have something that covers you for fraud in the future? 9 out of 10 times, they have no idea. And so I think that's really the education and consumer awareness that I really think the industry should be focused on.
Support for today's episode is provided by October Research. October Research provides national coverage of case law, news, regulatory updates, and competitive business strategies critical for sustaining an innovative and compliant real estate business operation. Our portfolio publications offer independent and unbiased information that helps you stay educated and informed on what matters most to your business. So visit octoberresearch.com to learn more about our portfolio of real estate publications, sign up for free email news, educational webinars, and premier industry events for thought leaders. Knowledge, the competitive advantage. I love that you're taking an educational first approach. I think that solves 80%, to your point, of the problems that are out there. And for the 20-30% that are remaining, yes, let's have products, let's have services, let's have solutions, but so much stems from education. And I hope you're seeing some of your clients going now out into the community and helping educate consumers, because to your earlier point, that's where a lot of times they're already ensnared in something before we ever interact with them.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And it's also a cool way too. I mean, just imagine the lead retention where right now the industry is very much focused on, getting transactions from real estate brokers, from lenders, right? And they're kind of, I don't want to say they're secondary, and yeah, there's relationships, but really they're focused on getting that work from professionals in the industry, where this would be a nice way also for them to repay those service providers. Hey, so-and-so just expressed an interest to unlock their title. They're interested in refinancing. They're interested in selling, whatever it may be. I mean, again, there really is a symbiotic lead, conversion element that could be passed now from the title industry back to the provider, the original provider, it really is kind of a cool full circle element that's associated.
And helping that consumer stay with trusted individuals that they already have a relationship with, as opposed to new person who may or may not also be fraudulent. I mean, right. I haven't heard about fraudulent real estate agents yet, but I'll bet we're not far off.
Well, so it's funny you should say that. So we had on that transaction I told you about, the Ron, that real estate broker went down all the way to the point where we had to show them a copy of the deed. We showed them the Ron, the notary that said it wasn't me, before he finally relinquished, because that's how desperate he was for that commission. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, it seems like there's so much to stay vigilant against. I love that you guys understood the need and you didn't just, kind of just go, oh yeah, that's there, and sweep it under the rug. You said this really needs somebody to come in and deal with it smartly, and in a holistic way. And I love that that's your approach. I'm assuming so far it's going along very successfully. It sounds like you have a lot of wins.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's exciting. I think too, people are starting to just now, right? I mean, we've been in the market now for about 9 months. The first few months, everybody, what you cloud title? Yeah, that's exactly what we do. We make the lawful homeowner somebody that needs to give permission for the next transaction. That's exactly what we do, right?
Cloud.
Right. That is what we do. And so I think it took, again, it's just a different way of thinking, where I think now things are starting to pick up. We're starting to have a pickup with the county recorders. I think I sent you a copy of one of them where they just made the announcement. I mean, it's the direct consumer is really, in my opinion, going to control how well this product does. And so that's a big focus that we're focused on. Simultaneously, we want to try to help educate the title industry the best we can, and make sure that they know that we're here to protect the consumer. That's what our goal is, right? And really, at the end of the day, we're protecting you, the title company, right? So you don't get stung. And so, I mean, that really is kind of our, put your head down and focus on what's right, really.
Well, and it feels like a bit of jujitsu, which is why I love it because you said, okay, here's the force, the opposite force that's coming at me. Let's use what we know how to do and create an intentional title cloud in
Right.
order to make the transaction go smoothly.
Right.
It's a great solution. I think it's so ingenious. You just really put your intuition to it, and I hope it continues to go swimmingly. What should people ask of you? For those that want to follow up with you after this, what kinds of questions should they ask?
Well, it depends. So coming from the industry, I think the most important thing that we get asked all the time, well, how much does it cost, right? What are some alternatives? How can you apply your product to a new transaction where there's a loan on the property and they're at low risk? I mean, there's lots of different ways that we're having title agents right now use it. Some of them are using it for recapture business. We have some lenders now that are using it on all their 3-2-1 buy downs. They know in 3 years they're gonna want to be notified, right? When they want to unlock title because they aren't getting credit alerts. They want to get notified. And so they have another option to do that refinance later on. And so we've partnered with some lenders, obviously title agents. We have an underwriter now that we're negotiating with. So, I mean, again, I think the industry is slow to move, where the direct consumer was something that obviously took off real quick because they saw the need for it.
Great. Well, on behalf of an industry that I've lived and worked in a long time, thank you for, really taking this seriously, putting your mental horsepower to it, and coming up with some solutions that actually will help protect people.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan, for being one of the good guys that are trying to fight scams with good sound practices that can help solve the problem. Now, listeners, you can learn more from Ryan and together maybe come up with even more ways to combat fraud by continuing the conversation. His email is linked in today's show notes. Thank you for joining us today and for making us a part of your continuing education in all matters real estate. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, stay empowered, and we'll keep having the guests and conversation that help you continue to successfully hold your keys to real estate. I'm Mary Schuster for October Research, where knowledge is the competitive advantage.